Hello and welcome to 1865, A View from the Forest. It's our midweek podcast at the end of the week. It's time for YATESY'S ESPRESSO BAR, and in today's podcast we're going to talk about city ground developments, what's going on there. We will have a little think about the Joe Lolley versus Steve Cooper issue that reared its ugly head in recent weeks. We'll preview the Leeds United match, the first match of the season coming up this Saturday. And we'll also have a think about the speculation of a new right wing back. That's all coming up in this episode of YATESY'S ESPRESSO BAR.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast with Rich Ferraro.
Okay, so it's a big welcome to Baz, and firstly, I hope you had a great summer. Thank you for sitting in the hot seat for the Group of Death podcasts in the World Cup. Did you enjoy doing that?
I did actually. It was, I think, because as ever, the England story was a bit of a roller coaster, so it worked quite well. It made it. I mean, it would have been a very different podcast if we'd gone out at the group stages.
Yes, there is that, isn't there? And I think as well, I find myself thinking about, obviously, most of us who were doing this were England fans, but it was nice to have a little bit of variation. We had Matt representing Scotland. We had also thinking about the stories, because that's what World Cups are about, isn't it? They're about the stories. And I've not ruled out going onto a certain Chinese website and ordering a Vizina goalkeeper top. But yes. And of course, as I mentioned in our pre-season podcast at the weekend, isn't it strange that Argentina, as despicable as they were, and yet still weren't the villains of the World Cup?
Well, I mean, I do distinctly remember opening with this has been the least corrupt World Cup so far, and that prediction went out the window, really.
Well, there's always room for improvement, isn't there? So, okay, and just for those of you who are listening rather than watching this podcast, I shall point out that Baz and I, neither of us are wearing the new away shirts, but both of us have taken inspiration. You with your colourway and wearing Adidas. Me, my shirt is a forest green. Unfortunately, it's not the bit of kit that has been released. What do you think about those new kits for this season?
I have the red one, the home kit. It does look a bit splodgy, but I also really, really like it. I just wish it had the trefoil on it, because that's so much better. The green, the away kit, I also absolutely love. However, I read an article, I can't remember where it was, which was like a rating of every club's home and away kit, and it said, "No, I don't like black kits," and I was like, "Are you blind? Are you colourblind?"
But in fairness, when they did the unveiling, it was just like, what colour is that? So, and of course, it's a big surprise because we all know the big guy. We heard this unconfirmed rumour that he really would not accept any team of his wearing green. Whether he's had to change his mind because of now owning Rio Ave, I don't know if that's made all the difference. So he's accepted it. And I've always thought it's weird that Forest haven't, apart from that lesser spotted third kit from the early 90s, the Forest haven't had a green kit, because it is part of Nottingham heritage, isn't it? And of course, there is the whole name thing as well. So it makes sense in many ways. I have to say, I don't like the home kit, and I'm still undecided on the away. I think I'd need to wait until I see it in action, really. I'm also very undecided about the new sponsors logo, because in the images that they shared on social media, with the way that there's a little logo at the end of the sponsor's name, it makes everything look slightly offset. So it sets alarm bells ringing in my brain.
I have to say, yeah, my home kit is a pre-sponsor, which I'm also very pleased about.
Yeah, I hear you. Right, let's start off by talking about the ground developments. And at the weekend, we didn't quite have enough time to include it in the weekend show, but our Tom gave us his insights, having carefully studied what's going on. Okay, so let's have a little chat about something that we didn't have time to fit into Sunday's podcast, our pre-season preview, and that is news of the City Ground redevelopment. Now, Tom, you've been all over this. The things that we know is that Forest want to expand the stadium. They want to make it big, but obviously there are a number of restrictions, not least space, with the river on one side and residential areas on the other. So can you give us a bit of an update as to what's happening with Forest's plans and also what's going on in terms of how the councils, and there are various parties who are involved in this, are responding to that?
Yeah, so since December, Forest obviously changed the plans. They got initial planning permission granted, and then they wanted to go bigger, which you can see why they did that with Europe and how we successful in the Premier League when we finished seventh, etc. And with the way football is going now, you need a stadium which is open 7 days a week, different things going on. So hence why Forest have wanted the capacity to be 52,000. So since December, Forest obviously submitted their new plans, and I've got to say they look fantastic. They look very much 21st century, what City Ground basically needs. So since then, in the background, there's been on the portal, there's been lots of designs and obviously documentations regarding various stakeholders. So where we are at the moment is that Forest want to, the first and foremost is having a new Peter Taylor stand, which is going to be bigger than the existing plans in terms of they want it. I think it's 3 tiers, and I think they want around about 15,000, which is going to be pretty much the same as Liverpool's main stand there. So, and I think it's going to be taller. Then they're going to fill the corners in at Trent End, and obviously take the roof off the Trent End, so it all comes in. Then the latter stages of phase is that they want an extra tier for the Brian Clough stand. But with that, as you've mentioned, they want space. So Forest have, if you read on Skyscraper on the website, is that it looks like Forest have purchased quite a few houses on Rosebery Avenue and Collick Road to obviously bring in the infrastructure. So that's where we're at in terms of the stadium. Then the bits around it, the old petrol station on Ratcliffe Road, Forest have secured that, which I think that had to remain dormant for 10 years because obviously it was a petrol station. So I think Forest will potentially have a foothold on.
So this is all about creating more space to expand the ground and to think about the infrastructure which you need, which is you can't just have entrance to a stadium like backing onto a main road, can you?
No, you can't. So and then looking at it is that Lady Bay, which has been a thorn in the side of the club and the various councils, is that the accessibility to that it's horrendous, especially at night matches, lack of lighting. So looking at the plans of that, it looks like they're going to have a big ramp going up to that, which is obviously going to make it more accessible and lighting. Then at the other end where Trent Bridge is, I think the plans at the moment is that they're going to take out a lane, which they're going to extend the pedestrian ways and the accessibility of that. So
yeah, and also where there's 2 tunnels underneath the bridge, one of which is not accessible. They're planning to make that so to make that decent surface and put lighting in and so on, aren't they?
Yeah, so I think it's too far down the line now for it to fail. I think the East Midlands Mayor Claire Ward is on board. They make it in like the Trent Sports Quarter. So there's not only Nottingham Forest's City Ground is going to be redeveloped. There's Homes England who are basically got the buildings across the river opposite Meadow Lane. I think that's going to be apartments. So yeah, in the next 10 years, that will be completely changed, that area of Nottingham, and we're going to be the heartbeat of that. So I think it's for the city and the local area, it needs to happen. I mean, you've got like fans there saying, "Oh yeah, it will never happen," etc., etc. But Forest have spent a hell of a lot of money, and we haven't even put a spade in the ground. So it's going to happen. I believe 16th of September is the pivotal date. I think that's when the planning committee is to give it the green light, and then this time next year we will see significant changes to the landscape of the City Ground, because that is when the new stand will start building. So I think they will do like prep work for it once the planning application has been granted. And then I think they will build from the back. I think they're going to fans are going to say, well, where am I going to sit when they knock it down? Well, I think they're going to build it like they did it with Anfield from the back and still keep the main stand and incorporate it in. So, yeah, it's very exciting. And with the way football is going, it's much needed. So, yeah, it's going to happen.
So, Baz, seems as though there's been a lot invested. Is this going to be like Boris Johnson's Garden Bridge? Is this going to be like HS2? Or is this going to be like Liverpool's stadium redevelopment? Is it, what are we going to get?
Well, I know a little bit about Liverpool's stadium development. I was a long chain down the way, but involved with the company that did it. And so, yeah, what Tom was saying, they actually built the new stand over the existing stand, so the existing stand stayed open. And then once the new stand was built, then they removed the existing stand and filled in the gap, which worked quite well. But obviously, the whole thing is, our problem is it's the three councils involved and it's lots and lots of purchasing. I did read that something that's going to affect us too is they're going to reduce the parking rights. So we already have to walk 15 minutes when we park halfway up Bridgeford. It's going to be like 25, half an hour minutes walk if you want to park, but that's fair enough. I think that I don't really have a problem with that if it goes ahead. We've been waiting for a very long time, and it sounds like there's much more movement, and there's an actual date for the council meeting now, which is the key thing.
Yeah. And on the parking thing, as long as the key thing there is as long as it's still accessible for people who have accessibility needs, you and I are able-bodied, we can walk an extra 10 minutes if we need to. So yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, the drawings look amazing, don't they? They really do. And again, like every time. So initially we had those initial drawings and we were granted permission, and then the club said, no, we need to do more than that. And every iteration has looked much more impressive. I think the other thing that's worth reflecting upon is that, we've seen Tottenham stay up by the skin of their teeth, thanks Villa, and then they've really, really splashed the cash. And the reason they can do that is because their non-football income is so impressive, and that is more or less a direct result. Well, it's a direct result of two things. One, being in London, but two, being in London with a stadium that can make money all year round, every day of the week. So that's what Forest will be hoping to achieve, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I live just next to the Headingley Cricket Ground and Leeds Rhinos, and it's a constant thing that they want to expand what those stadiums can do. They want to put gigs on and they want to have more events on, and the residents around here are totally against it. I have to admit it's very, very disruptive, but that's to do with parking and lots of other stuff. But I can completely understand why the stadium owners need that stuff to happen, because there's only so much you can get from sports fans turning up for their matches, and especially now that it's changed from PSR to whatever the squad ratio rules are.
Yeah.
We need that revenue.
Yeah.
The warning though, and although obviously they were under a different regime back then, but Arsenal, when they were building the Emirates Stadium, they stopped spending for 5 years and they really, really suffered. And they had a big dip in their performance because they couldn't compete with everyone else on the sporting side of things. I'm pretty sure Mr. Marinakis won't let that happen to us. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, I mean, I can't remember the precise rules around the time, but I was actually living really very close to the Arsenal Stadium at the time that they were building the Emirates. And yeah, basically the club went into a period of what we would now call austerity. But the difference is that, yeah, we've got different financial rules. And the other thing is that I think part of it was Arsenal saying, we don't just want to be throwing money willy-nilly at the football side when we've got the non-football side to look after. As you say, I don't think the big guys really that bothered by it. As long as we're sticking to the squad cost rules, then he can put the money into the stadium, and we know that he's got deep pockets and is willing to spend that money. So it all sounds pretty promising to me. And then if we think then about what the other kind of elements that we might want to think about with regard to that. I mean, you mentioned about living near a sports stadium, and it can be a little bit irritating when there's an event on and so on. I mean, on the other hand, and forgive me for playing devil's advocate on this, if you buy a house next to an existing sports stadium, you can't complain too much, can you?
You can't, but then the difference is when I bought the house, they had rugby was played in winter and cricket in summer. Now both of them are played, so it's a constant thing. And so I can imagine the residents in Bridgeford will be like, yeah, when I bought this house, Forest were in League One and and we're getting 10,000 people, and now there's 50,000 people turning up. So it's a change of thing.
Or there's stadium gigs going on in the summer months.
I don't complain about it. I mean, obviously the test's on at the moment. When I was trying to leave the house and try to drive past an incredibly narrow road because there were just massive cars, double parked on either side of the road. That's not going to affect the Bridgeford residents because we've just said they're changing the parking rules, which they haven't done around here. So I'm not going to complain about that. It will be a change for the residents, though.
Yes, that's fair comment. So still to come, we're going to go and revisit the strange, is it a beef? I don't know. The issue between Joe Lolley and Steve Cooper. And we will also spend some time previewing the Leeds match coming up on Saturday. But first, it's time for this.
The 1865 Sketch by Jeremy Davies. And we're off again. I'm still coming down from the emotional high of England's win over Mexico, but that's what World Cups can do to you. Possibly because being allowed to stay up late to watch the football evoked memories of my childhood, and I'm a sucker for nostalgia. In almost the exact inverse of the apathy people felt about the World Cup before it actually started, it's hard not to feel excited and more than a little intrigued as a supporter of Nottingham Forest Football Club at the prospect of a new Premier League season. Partly this is because no one really knows what to expect from yet another new manager. It may not have escaped the notice of long-time listeners that this is the second time since Forest returned to the top flight that the Premier League kicks off with the country, never mind any of the clubs, under new management. People say that politics is show business for ugly people, but if you think about it, there have been more parallels with English football in recent times. Spiralling levels of debt, failure to balance the books, controversial trips to the USA. What links Jordan Henderson with fellow senior citizen King Charles III? Nobody thought they should go to America, although at least Charles didn't have a fall when he was over there. And fierce debate over who occupies number 10. I guess that to make the analogy complete, with the King of the North heading south from Manchester to become Prime Minister, you'd need Pep taking over the England job. The announcement of plans for a new number 10 North has echoes of the tactics favoured by Oliver Glasner, with two 10s supported by a rigidly structured system. Of course, one big difference between Glasner and Andy Burnham is that the Forest coach is replacing a man noted for being a vibes manager, and you'd never describe the man the current Prime Minister replaced, Keir Starmer, in case anyone's forgotten him already, as someone who got by on good vibes. But has it escaped people to notice that the initials of the new Forest coach are OG, an acronym with unfortunate connotations in the sport? Thank goodness football people aren't superstitious. The other popular usage of the initialism is, of course, the OG, as in original gangster, defined on dictionary.com as someone who is incredibly exceptional, authentic or old school. And this is hopefully a more apt reading of his initials. He's already an exceptional figure in the history of English football, having won silverware with Crystal Palace. And there's something pretty old school about his disciplinarian reputation. And of course, there's something pretty old school Forest about appointing a manager whose playing career was prematurely ended by injury. Now who does that remind you of? Let's not get carried away. Brian Clough was the OG. I'll settle for hoping that this particular OG lasts longer than VP, SD or AP, and that getting rid of Vitor to bring him in doesn't turn out to be an own goal.
Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Okay, so one of the big stories that's emerged in the last couple of weeks as a result of our podcasting colleagues at Forest Focus, Matt Davies had an interview with former Forest man Joe Lolley, who, after leaving the City Ground, went to move to Australia. And I think it's fair to say that in his last season at the City Ground, after having been, a real hero, Lolley's last season was difficult. And yeah, let's just say that Lolley had a few things to say about Steve Cooper. So we've got two Forest heroes kind of pitted up against each other. Tom, do you also give us a little bit of lowdown about some of the stuff that Lolley said in his interview?
Well, he basically, at the end of the during the podcast, he was going on about his obviously his relationship with Steve Cooper and everything, and he wanted to get him to get the sack and everything because he wasn't playing, etc., etc. But let's face it, in Joe's defence, it was the year before we got promoted, etc. He was a shadow of his former self. He couldn't beat a man. He just looked like very leggy, and obviously later transpired that he had compartmental injury. It was like similar to shin splints and everything, and yeah, it was just a shadow of his former self. And with what he was saying about Steve Cooper, I just think all right, if you've got a bit of beef with him, just like leave it. Don't tarnish him like that. We know, like Steve Cooper, obviously he got the sack from Forest, but yeah, he didn't put himself in a good light, did he, by saying that? But I mean, I got canned on Twitter earlier in the week, basically saying, and I probably didn't use my words wisely, and members from Red Side of the Trent, Lee Clark, who I get on really well with, says, yeah, you probably used the wrong word when I used sabotage regarding that penalty, because when he walked up, he looked like self-sabotage. Like you get people who they go against the grain, don't they? Things aren't working. I know he got the assist in the first leg and everything, but Samba heroics, he saved from Houlihan, he saved from I can't remember the other one. Oh no, Oliver Norwood, wasn't it? And the stadium was up, and then Joe Lolley walked up, and yeah, he probably wanted nothing more than get him to be the one to put Forest into the playoff final, but he didn't look right, did he? And I used the word sabotage, which I probably shouldn't have said that, but
it could. I think maybe what did you mean? Sort of an act of self-sabotage, like the kind of unconscious thing where you've got to have if you're going to take a penalty, especially in a shootout, your mentality has to be absolutely 100%. I'm going to score this, and if there's any doubt, then you're not the right man to take that penalty, are you?
Yeah, exactly. And he just he smashed it over the bar and everything. And like I says, I use the word self-sabotage, which, yeah, he probably wasn't the right man for the job. But then others were saying, well, Cafu took a penalty and he's not really a notable penalty taker. Yeah, but he scored it. But yeah, I just thinking, to put it into context, Joe Lolley in the final 12 months of his reign, let's say, he wasn't the Ger Lynch of old, and he probably should have gone to Villa, after that 5-0 when the rumours were right that he was going to his boyhood club. He should have gone, but obviously Forest didn't take the money because he was still...
And also, it's very easy to look back and say, well, that would have been a good time to go, because at the time, Forest wanted to keep him because we're still hoping to get promotion.
Exactly.
And of course, ultimately, we did get promotion with him in the squad. Now, George, I'm only going by little clips I've seen on social media. I've not listened to the whole thing all the way through, but I think Joe's maybe been honest in this interview and said that there's a bit of me that was so upset at the situation that I wanted Cooper to get the boot because that would have been an end to that situation for me. I don't think it's him saying I was trying to engineer the manager's departure.
No, absolutely. No, it's just a sort of personal thing that he's amounted because of how he feels that he's been treated. And, we've heard it before with the Worrell and Cooper thing. And it's quite sad to hear all this, players coming out sort of 3 or 4 years later to in an attempt to maybe can the manager or something, because there's nothing really I don't think you could say that would alter most Forest fans' opinion on Steve Cooper or on that team. I don't think it really changes our memory or anything, and in a way it just casts your mind back to that season and to the positivity that we had. So yeah, I do think it's a bit of a weird time. I spoke to Joe. He was in the away end at West Ham, the last game of the promotion, the European season. He was over with I think he was with his mum or something, and he was in the away end, and it was really lovely to see him. Like, you can tell he does love the club and that he's really cured a liking him for Forest. And he was at Huddersfield for a long time, but on the pod he said that sort of he sees Forest and Villa as his two teams now in a way. So it is nice that he can have this feeling against Cooper and separate it from the club, and that he still has that affinity towards us. Because I was at Middlesbrough away when he scored them two brilliant goals, that amazing one in that gold kit, and that was an amazing time. And that's what, as much as the penalty wasn't great, obviously you don't think about that because Forest eventually went through. I think about that season when Ger Lynch was 18-19 and he was fabulous then. So
yeah.
It doesn't tarnish my memory of Cooper or Lolley at all. I just think it is slightly unnecessary, but also it does sort of produce the headlines for people to go and maybe watch the interview more as well. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, Joe was asked to do an interview. He did an interview. He reflected upon his emotions. That's not necessarily a reflection upon how he would act if the same situation occurred again, or who knows. But Married on the Midlands, going on from what George said, I think we can still love Joe Lolley for his contributions in the Forest shirt, and we can still love Steve Cooper for being the manager who took us up and kept us up.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a non-story, really. A player who wasn't getting played was unhappy with his manager. That's the case.
Yeah.
For every single player, then most of them aren't honest enough to say. Because I 100% believe this, that if a player's not in a team, 99% of them want the team to lose. As a professional player, I don't think any of them want to see like their player who's replacing them do well in the team, because it harms their own career. So I think he's just been a bit too honest. And obviously the podcasts have taken advantage of it to get the headlines, to get the social media, put it out there and get views and clicks or whatever. But it's a bit of a non-story, and like George said, it's just a bit sad that this keeps on coming out. It's the same with Worrell, a player who can't play is unhappy with the manager. Joe, in the interview, admitted his fitness wasn't great, and the fact that he went to Australia to Forest rather than another move to even the Championship in England sort of speaks volumes of the sort of level of fitness he had at the time and the playing level. So. He was never going to get into that Premier League team after sort of not playing that regularly in the promotion team. So it's a bit I don't know, silly for him to sort of come out and say these things. But the biggest takeaway.
Okay, I'm just gonna play devil's advocate before I come to Tom, which is that what has emerged is that Coops didn't really talk to Joe at all about it, and. So the defence is, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, the defence is, as a manager in that high pressure situation, I've got to get promotion. What you're going to do is you're going to focus upon the players who are contributing, and you don't have time to do anything else. And we know that being a manager is a 24/7, 365 job. You are constant, and Coops has talked about, his family were living in North Wales at the time. He was away from his wife and his teenage kids and everything. So it was, and in fact, one of the abiding memories I have of Wembley is his teenage son running on the pitch and giving Coops a big hug. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate, but on the other hand, could Cooper have managed that situation better in terms of the communication with the player? Maradona.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that I do sort of take away, not just in this situation, but every professional situation where players say they got told by text. I think that's disrespectful, especially if somebody who's a senior professional at the club. I think it doesn't take a lot to pick up the phone. I know it's not an easy conversation to have, but I think it shows a bit of moral fibre if you do call them up. And the fact that he had to go and play on a train on his own in a park somewhere. I saw Gaitan Bong training on his own down at the Forest recreation ground. He's all turned up in his Lamborghini and then got out and started training there, which I thought was strange at the time. So I think that sort of thing, clubs can improve. I know you've got a bomb squad, but it doesn't take a lot to let them train.
Or a bong squad, as it was then.
Yeah, use the gym at the training ground and the training pitches. So that, I think that's something that Forest and other teams can improve on. But I know why they do it. It's trying to make life as uncomfortable as possible. Somebody who's on a huge wage, so that they feel like they have to go out of the club. But that is as a human being, I don't think it's right, and they should treat them a bit better. I think Tom's got something to say.
Yeah, but with the podcast and getting like various pros on, and I mean, pros are, at the moment are like getting canned like for not saying what they actually feel. It's a bit like robotic and a bit generic, answering and questioning and things like that. So sometimes it's like it's nice to actually hear the honest truth, and some of us might not like it. Yeah, we know Forest are ruthless when they want to get a player out the door. They do what Maradona's just said. So, but then it's good listening, isn't it? You know, hearing like things what you would like to see rather than like who's the best player they played with and things like that, and get a bit bored with those types of questions.
Yeah,
so,
people want to know what's actually going on in the club that they plough their emotions and a huge amount of money into.
Yeah, definitely.
Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Welcome back to 1865 and to Yates's Espresso Bar. So, Baz, just before the break, we did hear a few comments about the whole weird situation. I mean, it's a mountain out of a molehill, isn't it? It's a player who's asked, what did you think about the situation when you were marginalised from the team? And he said, I felt a bit crap about it. And the emotional side of me wished that Steve Cooper would get sacked. Can't blame him for that. And also, he was asked a question, so he's going to answer it.
Yeah, I think, as everyone said, players want to play. Especially if you're an attacker, you're going to have an ego about you, and you're going to think you're good enough, even if you're not. And Lolley, much as we love him, yeah, he was suffering with that injury, and I'm not entirely sure he would cut it in the Premier League.
No. Oh, well, I mean, and as was said in that discussion, you look at the level he's been playing at ever since, and that probably tells its own story. But, you know, fair play. He took that decision to move to the other side of the world, have a great life. Can't argue with it. So, I mean, the only thing is, of course, Steve Cooper hasn't had a right to reply because, you know, I don't know, Forest Focus have invited him on to do that. I would imagine that even if he did have a chat with them, he might want to stay clear of that topic. He might choose not to talk about it.
Lolley might say equally, you look at the level Steve Cooper's managing at now. So.
Well, he's not managing at the moment, is he? So, there's a whole argument there. Let's move on and let's think about the Leeds United match, the first match of the new Premier League season. So excitement abounds. And we had a little chat with Ger Lynch, who's a Leeds United fan, and he wanted to tell us about what he's thinking about Leeds prospects this season and how the match might go.
Right, so Leeds versus Nottingham Forest, first game of the season. A lot of changes for you guys over the summer, but Leeds is quite changed as well, specifically in the back line. Brand new goalkeeper in James Trafford, so a far more competent and relaxing goalkeeper and proven entity than we had last season we played against you guys. Also at the back, a lot of changes. Tariq Muharramovic has come in from Bosnia on the left-hand side of what will be a back three. We've also added Nico Elvedi as an option there as well. We've lost Pascal Stroke, and we've also lost the goalkeepers in Carl Darlow, Ilan Melier. And we've improved on the right-hand side of Sebastian Borneo leaving by adding Nico Elvedi. Fullback's pretty much the same. Leeds are a little bit light on the left-hand side. Gabby Goodmunson won't be available for the game. He's out injured for the first couple of weeks of the season, so we'll also miss the game in the Cup as well in midweek. So James Justin likely to slot in at left back for Leeds. Midfield is pretty much as it was last season. Ethan Ampadu, Sean Longstaff, Anton Stack will be in there for Leeds. And then in the attacking areas, one major change, and that's Harry Wilson coming in on the right-hand side for Leeds. On the left, you've got Noah Okafor or Brendan Aronson, who will likely play there. Not guaranteed. Both have had decent pre-seasons. Okafor late back after the World Cup. And Calvert-Lewin's had a really strong pre-season for Leeds. Injury-free again. So it'll be our major threat up forward. Leeds likely to play a 3-5-2 or 3-4-2-1 system. So you'll see 2 players tucked in behind Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Main area for Leeds is going to be that attacking third. The defence looks pretty solid, but I think if you're looking for what threat Leeds can give to Nottingham Forest, it will be Wilson and Okafor or Aronson cutting in from the wide areas and looking to feed Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We've got plenty of goals from midfield as well. We've got set piece takers as well now that we didn't really have last year. We only had Anton Stack last year. This year we've got Wilson, Stack, Longstaff is now back involved and fully fit as well. So there's a couple in there as well. Might be 1 or 2 more additions, unlikely before the weekend, but it's a more stable looking Leeds United side, far more stable around the club as well. And a much more relaxed, competent and calming Leeds United are heading into the start of the season, and the fears of last year aren't really there this summer. We're expecting Leeds to be a mid-table finish this year as well, and they're not finished their business, as I'm sure you guys aren't yet, but looking forward to a really good game against what will be a very different looking Nottingham Forest under Oliver Glasner, and seeing what you guys do in midfield. So yeah, best of luck to you guys for the season. Not in this game, fingers crossed Leeds will get a win, but I wouldn't be shocked if both teams walk away with a point after this one.
Thank you very much, Ger. He sounds confident, and as you mentioned earlier, you live in Leeds. I think there is a general, the mood amongst Leeds fans is pretty strong, isn't it?
It is. It was really funny last year because Daniel Farke, he did struggle at the start of the season, and he kind of did what Steve Cooper did in our first season back, which was after a couple of months, he basically threw away the blueprint and rebuilt the side to play a totally different way. And I think they've only lost 5 in their last 25 games, and they have arguably strengthened since then.
They've definitely strengthened. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I pointed out when Ger sent me that clip, I said, he's talking about the strength up front, but to me, James Trafford is an absolute game-changing signing for them. If you can have a top-class goalkeeper as a team who were in the lower reaches of the table the previous season, that can be the difference between finishing top half, maybe even challenging for Europe, because Trafford is going to win them a lot of points this season.
I'm still unconvinced by him, but he will definitely improve their distribution. And the way they like to play, I think he's probably quite a good fit for them. I think their biggest issue is probably Calvert-Lewin, because they haven't really got someone else to
having a striker with an injury record who might not play the entire season. What kind of club would have that?
I know, but then we've got a lot of potential replacements who might not be quite as good, or play a different way. They don't really have that. So
well, they've got Okafor, and Wilson's a funny one. I've never been convinced by it. He does brilliant things occasionally, but I think he does them in patches, and I've never been convinced by him. Like, if people would say, would you want your club to sign Harry Wilson? I don't think I would. And but the point I was going to make is that he's played up front for Wales, and I think he filled in up front a couple of times for Fulham. But so, yeah, if Calvert-Lewin's not available, then they've got sort of not quite number 9s to play. Yeah. And again, what kind of club would have that?
Exactly, yeah. But I mentioned in the group chat that so the Athletic do a pre-season fan survey of like, how confident are you? And Leeds United, well, as an aside, Forest fans were 96% confident, 4% not confident. And the last time that happened, we finished 7th and ended up in Europe when everyone else was tipping us to go down, which sounds familiar to me. Mm-hmm. Let's hope for a repeat there. But Leeds United fans topped that one with 99% confident, 99% of the fans. And Leeds United fans are, like as I was saying, Daniel Farke last season, even when they started picking up points, there were a lot of fans that wanted him out because they were like, well, we should be doing better than this. And they had very, very high expectations of their first season back.
Should they? I'm really not sure they should, but there you
go. Well, I suppose they weren't out for as long as we were, so we were just happy to be there to some extent as long as we stayed up, whereas they were like, yeah, we should be a mid-table side, at the very least a club our size. And so there was a lot of pressure on Daniel Farke last season. So for them to be 99% confident, one, that shows how well they've bought and how well they've actually ended last season, but it also might backfire a little bit if things don't go their way by sort of November or whatever again.
Yeah. No, I mean, football fans are fickle creatures. We all know that's the case. The other thing that I wanted to come back to is that you mentioned about how Farke, he threw out his game plan and went to a different method, and he did exactly the opposite of Stevie Cooper, because Cooper started playing a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-1-2, and then had to go to a 4-3-3, whereas Farke was playing with 4 at the back and he went to 3 at the back, to essentially a 3-4-3, and that's what he did to get Leeds to turn it around. Without revisiting stuff that we discussed last weekend, what I will say is that, look, we know that Forest are going to play 3-4-2-1. JD said in his sketch earlier, no one knows what to expect from a new manager, and then, look, let's be honest, we do. We know exactly what to expect from Glasner because we've seen it in action at Palace, and we know that's exactly what he's going to try and replicate, albeit hopefully with better players and to greater effect in the league. So we discussed last weekend about actually most positions are a shoo-in, but there's 2 or 3 positions I want to focus upon. Number 1 is number 1. We still haven't got someone wearing the number 1 shirt. And I just don't understand, do you, why the club didn't say to Stefan Ortega, stay and be the number 1. Why didn't they do that?
Obviously, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I thought, I said last season, I don't think of it as having like a number 1 and a reserve keeper. We had 2 number 1s. We just played them in different competitions last season. And the only thing I can think of is, maybe he wanted to guarantee that number 1 shirt for himself, and they didn't want to push Sells out. But I mean, Sells. I'm sure Sells is going to start. I noticed in the pre-season games, Glasner was obviously trying out the other keepers to see what's what. But Sells is the most experienced. Sells is the one to go for there.
Who do you think's going to be on the bench? Do you think the new signing is going to be saying to Big John, "Kiss my shiny metal ass"?
I have been thinking, what's the song going to be for him? But I mean, I don't know, because Big John's played a lot of the pre-season games, but obviously Bender wasn't in then. He did play 45 minutes, didn't he, in the last one? So I don't know, and obviously I don't know what Glasner's necessarily looking for from a keeper. I am glad that we do have that 3 keepers who, despite Big John's hair-raising moments and whatever, who are actually pretty decent, I think.
Well, I mean, I will say that Glasner at Palace, he had Sam Johnston, and then once he managed to sign Henderson very quickly, it felt at that point as if they've got a situation of 2 number 1s, but Henderson very quickly displaced him, partly because of his ability to distribute, partly because of his strength of character, and he was made the captain by Glasner when Gehi was sold. So it does suggest he does have some stock in having a strong goalkeeper. So that's a little bit surprised. Let's move to the other end of the pitch. We've alluded
just to add to that. I from his 6 months or whatever at Forest, I loved Dean Henderson because he shouted and he was a character, and we had Bree Samba a year before that, and I really like that in a keeper. So if Glasner's looking for that, I can see why maybe he's got a little bit of doubt about Sells, because he's not that kind of character.
Yeah, Big John is a character. It's just a question of which type of character he's going to turn out to be, isn't it? Let's move to the other end of the pitch, as we've already alluded to. So Chris Wood, the new number 9. Not a big surprise he's taken the shirt. I'm just going to point out that Taiwo's bed is still warm. It's like he wasted no time with that one, did he? But also Woody was playing in the B team on Sunday when the A team were playing a behind closed doors friendly against Coventry. So does that mean that Igor's likely to play as the first choice central striker until and unless we sign another striker, a Dalap or whoever?
I suspect because it's Leeds and we're playing him twice, he might start. Wood will start one of the two games because they're a big side. This new Bosnian lad whose name I can't remember how to pronounce. Yeah, he's a big lad. The new wing back guy is another big fast lad. And they made a point of signing very physical players all through last season and this season.
That's not like Leeds, is it?
Yeah, but yeah, so Woods obviously he's not the heftiest, but he is physically capable of holding his own, especially against a back three. So I think he'll definitely start one of the two. It's whether he's got the fitness to start both of them.
Yeah. I should imagine the answer is no. He made a comment the other day about, we know what Woody can do, but we also know we need to manage his minutes. I wouldn't be at all surprised actually if it's Jesus starting on Saturday, and I wouldn't be surprised if Callum Moendo gets a run out in the Carabao Cup match. Maybe as a centre forward. So I think that's going to be an interesting one to know. So let's move back to the other point of debate. We've touched upon it again in Sunday's podcast. But the B team played on Sunday featuring Schlager, which suggests that he might actually play McAtee in that number 6'8" Adam Wharton type role. And you've just said it. Is Leeds the right match to try that?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing is all the reports I've seen. Obviously, I was due. If you weren't aware, I was due to go to one of the pre-season games, but that fell apart the last minute. But all the reports I've seen is McAtee's excelling in that sort of role. But yeah, Leeds are very physical, and I know he spent all summer in the gym. But even then, I'm not sure you can expect.
And just to revisit something that I did say at the weekend. So, yes, his kind of core strength and his upper body strength is something he's had to work on. But the thing that you can't magic up is pace. And if you're going to play in a double pivot, you need to be able to cover that ground and cover it quickly. Now, I was talking to Ger for his podcast, Leeds United Way, and he was making the point, but on the other hand, he's basically going to have minders either side of him. He's going to have Sangare, and then he's going to have Murillo Milenkovic behind him. He's going to have Williams to one side, and then he's going to have Gibbs White just in front. So does that mitigate slightly?
Again, I think the fact that we're playing them twice in a week, I could see him starting for one of them, and it'll give us a clue as to how Oliver Glasner sees the Carabao Cup. Whether it's something he wants to go out and win, or if he wants to prioritise getting to a good start in the league. Because the other thing to note is if you watched any of the Ivory Coast games, Sangare wasn't playing as a number 6. He was doing what Elliot Anderson was doing for us last season. So he was playing very deep and doing lots of defensive work, but then bursting into the box and producing the sort of vertical passes to cut people open, turn defence into attack. So maybe Sangare with maybe Dominguez or someone like that alongside him, and we're kind of trying to reproduce last season a little bit in that way. And again, that pairing against a very physical Leeds side could work, but I don't think he'll do the same thing twice.
I don't think he's going to do that at all, because I think Dominguez and Sangare will compete for one position. I think McAtee and Schlager will compete for the other. And, of course, there is the other interesting element, which is that he's played Yates as a centre-back in pre-season. So, yeah, it remains to be seen what role, if any, the club captain is going to play. Let's move on to finish off today's podcast to the potential signing of a new right wing-back, Dodô, from Fiorentina. And we discussed at the weekend about how Ola Aina probably isn't the right guy to be a right wing back. particularly in a Glasner system, having had the extreme athleticism of Daniel Munoz at Crystal Palace, Ola just isn't really capable of doing that kind of thing. So I'd heard Dodô's name, but I didn't know a huge amount about him. And friend of the podcast, Adam Summerton, TNT commentator, posted on social media, having watched him play quite a lot. And he said, right, first thing to note is his acceleration. He's very quick, gets up and down the right flank. So tick, carries the ball well, good dribbler. And although he can play either as an orthodox fullback or a right wing back, I'd say wing back suits him best. Tick. Obviously, says Cafu and Roberto Carlos are his biggest inspirations. There's a surprise. End products can be a little bit erratic, although only 20 Serie A players averaged more key passes per game last season, so that sounds pretty good. Positions himself well to make interceptions, but that pace kind of helping him to support his teammates. And although he did have a bad injury in his second season at Fiorentina, it's worth noting that he's otherwise been very available. So he's not got the kind of stop-start nature that you see with some players. And he was ahead of Brentford's Michael Coyote, who, of course, has been one of the best right-backs in the Premier League last season. He was very much ahead of him, although, of course, Dodô is 27 and Coyote's 22. So you kind of, maybe not quite at the level that he needed to be to compete. But it sounds promising, doesn't it?
It does. I was listening to the Ola Aina discussion from the weekend, and I think you made the point about how him, Callum, and Elanga were like a little group together. And losing Elanga sort of and them having those injuries probably isolated them a little bit, and they're very sort of loud, bubbly personalities, so maybe that had an impact on his form last season. But also, I don't think he ever recovered from the injury that he picked up at the end of the Nuno's glory season. He's never been the same player since that. So I think,
so we did get a comment on our YouTube channel, and there's people saying, George commented about Ola's desire. I think there's times he could have done better in terms of his being mentally switched on, but I think I'm always wary about questioning a player's desire, because I think if you're carrying an injury, or if you are not capable of doing the things you were capable of, maybe never mind a few months ago, a few matches ago, then it makes it look like you're not making any effort. But actually, it can be just that your body's not able to cash the checks that your brain is writing.
Yeah, and obviously, switching to wing back in a Glasner type system it does feel to me like it's probably going to be too much for Ola, which is a shame because I really, really liked him. But yeah, from the little I didn't know what Adam Summerton has said, but the little I knew of Dodô, it does sound like he'd be a very, very good fit for us. Especially as when it comes to end products, he's going to have Morgan or maybe Amari or someone he just needs to give the ball to one of them. He doesn't necessarily have to do everything himself.
That's a fair point. And with this whole idea of having kind of, rather than wingers having kind of inside tens, I suppose, it means that shape-wise as well, there can be some, we've seen it with Ola and notably Elanga, but Ola and a little bit with Hutchinson last season, where you get some nice little triangles in those channels, which can open up space either to come inside if you're Hutchinson, or if you're the fullback to go outside, get down to the byline and cross it in. So all sounds promising. Let's watch this space on that one.
The other thing to note is, it does sound, and you mentioned it on Sunday, we're not trying to recreate Crystal Palace here because we've got different players, but Glasner makes a point, it's not about the formation, it's about what you do with the ball and without the ball. But Palace did have Munoz on one side and it was Mitchell on the other, wasn't it? Yeah. And Mitchell's not a full-on attacking wing-back. So he was quite happy for the side to be slightly unbalanced defensively and attacking-wise. And I can see that working if we're playing, if it was Nets and Williams, say, you see that same thing. Or if it's Williams on the left and Dodô on the right, then yeah, Williams is always going to be defensively secure when he's playing on the left. So
yeah, and of course the other parallel there is that Mitchell being slightly less attacking meant that Gehi, when he was on the left-hand side of the Palace defence, he was able to bring it out, carry the ball out a little bit. So you know, just saying we've got Murillo in that
defender to do that, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, cool. All right, well, we'll leave it there. We've had plenty on our plate in this particular podcast, so we want to say thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Baz, and to all Forest fans out there, we'll see you at the City Ground on Saturday. Come on, you Reds.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other listeners find our content.